about 10 cents. So they have enough money left over to buy Congress, and they own Congress. So you're not going to get your Congress to buy for you vitamin C, but, they're going to put in a prescription plan so you can have statins, which you need like a hole in the head. There's natural ways of dealing with heart disease. I haven't had a patient die of a heart attack in over 30 years now, and we have absolutely shown that you can stop the whole heart disease program with the oral chelation. But it's more. My oral chelation is not just EDTA. There's 9 pills in what I call my Beyond Chelation, and they include the omega-3 that is now proven to make your arteries more flexible. That study came out this week. And the primrose oil has to be in there to balance the omega-3. And then we have phosphatidylserine and ginkgo. And so the 9 pills that I put in there have to give you good stuff like selenium and zinc, because chelating is non-specific. Any treatment, even vitamin C or high doses of fiber, which are good for you because they do help get rid of lead and mercury, have a side effect. They are not so smart to only grab just the lead and mercury in. They cannot avoid taking out some of the zinc and other good things that you need. So therefore, I always have to have everybody on the strongest possible multiple, because we as a nation are so low on selenium and magnesium in our diet, which comes, somewhat from farming practices, because we don't pay the farmer for how healthy the tomato is. We pay the farmer for how many tons of tomato he raises. And so obviously, unless you raise your own food, which is what in the long run would cut down our healthcare costs tremendously. If we went back to the victory gardens we had during Second World War, and we all raised our own food in community gardens, we could change what's going on drastically overnight.
In Detox with Oral Chelation, I read several things that were so stunning. One was you had talked about cows eating in New Zealand. Now, New Zealand is known to have the best practices for raising animals and not polluting, and yet there was an example given in your book. If these cows were by a freeway or by some type of coal plant, that those cows would be filled with all of these toxic chemicals.
It's totally true. In particular in New Zealand, they didn't have the more modern refineries for their gasoline refineries, and so they did wind up with quite high levels of lead in their fuel. Now, that may have changed in the last couple of years, but that was certainly the case when I was there. But we have the same problem right now in America. If you are living in California and you live near a freeway, if you are raising your really great cabbages and you're within 100 or 200 yards of those freeways, those cabbage are a natural chelator, just like garlic is a natural chelator. So when my friend that has really good garlic in Japan, the Kyolic company,
right,
he asked me, could I find unpolluted land in America that he could raise and sell the kind of garlic that he sells in Japan, because he found actual forest primeval in the northern tip of Hokkaido, way up there, almost looking at Russia. He found land that was clean. I couldn't find that clean land, and so the products that you raise, if you are raising these healthy foods, they can actually be chelating out of the soil and pulling into that cabbage huge levels of cadmium and lead if you're unlucky enough to live near a freeway.
This is really a whole systems approach to looking at even the kind of supplements that we're taking and where the food and where everything is coming from. Growing it organically, for example, if it's near a coal plant or if it's near a freeway, it's a whole other way to think about it, with the air, the water, the food that we're eating, if it was a living thing, where it was living, what it was eating, everything. It's the whole series of events.
Since I became deeply involved in trace element metabolism, I became convinced. My mentor, John Miller, who was the first one to put minerals into a vitamin called one-a-day vitamin mineral, that was the first one in the history of man that put minerals into a supplement. He taught me that we have to get the trace elements back that are being washed off the topsoil down the Mississippi River into the oceans. We have to move these trace elements back onto the land and re-enrich the land. And I analyzed the land. We analyzed the land in New Zealand. It was very low on cobalt, so they had to use cobalt to make New Zealand that lovely green island that it is. So everything is not as simple as you'd like it to be, and our land is today has so much lead. In fact, they're even telling people today that when you have balsamic vinegar, which everybody knows is expensive, well, yeah, but the land in that part of Italy is loaded with lead, and so that vinegar is giving you a lot of lead. So I just teach people it's cheaper rather than making you afraid to enjoy food. I eat fish as often as I want to, 4 or 5 times a week. But I know how much mercury I can get rid of with natural chelators, and I'm on my natural chelator every day, but I'm also on high doses of C. And my natural chelators even include garlic. But the EDTA is the one that has the punch that can do so much more, because it turns out that when people tell me that taking EDTA is a waste of time, I tell them one little trick. In America, we have lots of people who've got a disturbed heart rhythm, and they tell them they could die of a clot, so they give them aspirin, Plavix, and or Coumadin, which is rat poison. So I tell them that, interestingly enough, if you don't want to die of a clot, look at what the doctor does when he does a blood test on you. He draws the blood in a little lavender tube. At the bottom of the tube, there's a little liquid. That liquid is EDTA. Why is it at the bottom of the tube? Because EDTA means that the blood will not clot, so they can do your blood test. So when people tell you a little EDTA isn't important, all I can tell them is look at the obvious. The world's experts will tell you you really die of clots. You don't die of cholesterol. It is such a sad travesty that due to greed, we wind up having tremendous marketing to tell everybody, oh, you owe it to yourself. You've got to have your cholesterol measured, and if it's the slightest bit, we've got to put you on our drug, which is now proven to be increasing the rate of diabetes, etc. So it's really quite interesting to realize that the blood clotting is what is really what people die of, or they wouldn't be putting people on Coumadin, Plavix, and aspirin. So it's the clot. And the clot is what I'm teaching people is what we spent some $10 million in the 1960s, when that was real money back in the 60s. And we got that money and worked with the Atherosclerosis Research Institute and Lester Morrison, and we found that in the ocean there are things related to algae like carrageenan that absolutely makes the body think we're giving it heparin. And when we find that EDTA makes heparin work by mouth, I now have a natural way to keep people alive, which is why I canceled bypass surgery on people, including Pastor Hinn, who had significant problems. They wanted him to live on drugs the rest of his life because he'd gone into auricular fibrillation, and they wanted to put him on rat poison, Coumadin, and he was smart enough to think his way out of it. But most people can't because the system is stacked against you. You're only covered by your insurance if you do the bad stuff, the toxic stuff. That's the toximolecular game. I do the orthomolecular game, the correct molecule in the right place, right time. That word was given to me by Linus Pauling, and that's the kind of medicine we practice. And there's always a natural alternative to 99% of the drugs they give you today. But, of course, they're not going to pay for it. It's not going to be in the government-sponsored prescription plan because, after all, we have the best Congress that money can buy.
The C that you have created in your supplemental C is one of the unique delivery systems for C. Tell us why.
Well, what happened is because Linus Pauling was my mentor, and my brother was a physician, and he could take the 18,000 milligrams, 20,000 that Linus Pauling liked to take, and I couldn't go above 1,000 because I have some very bad health problems since childhood. I have very bad genes. I have total achlorhydria. I have many things wrong with my body. So by age 29, my body gave up. I had to close my medical practice. I could not even walk from room to room to see a patient. That's how bad I was. And so with that problem, I adored Linus Pauling, but he was suggesting something I couldn't do. So it took 10 years to figure out a way to make vitamin C that I could be taking every day, never less than one slightly heaping teaspoon morning and night, which is 4 grams. But as you said, it's a delivery system because we added to it the ribose, the methylsulfonomethane, the trimethylglycine. We did some very specific things to it, And it is absolutely so important today that most of the cancer patients who've learned not to stick with the chemo and are doing much more of the vitamin C, they know they can't afford to be in the doctor's office with IV vitamin C every day. So what can they do in between? And so obviously we devised a vitamin C that provably, by measuring the level of vitamin C in your urine with a 20-cent stick that anyone can obtain, 50 of these sticks